How we doing? Day 42 out here. Just past the 10 degrees south latitude and just heading south. Basically doing the exact same thing that I have done for the past month. I think it's been a month of pretty much being hard on the wind, trying to claw my way down south.
Welcome back to Sailing into Oblivion, the solo nonstop voyage of the Mighty Sparrow. I'm your host, Jerome Rand, and we're going to pick right up where we left off on the voyage into the South Atlantic. So we crossed the equator after about 40 days out at sea. Had to tango with Ophelia a little bit, had some breakdowns, but was doing pretty good. Mentally, I think I was coming into my own and ready to charge forth. But the South Atlantic was being a bit of a bear as far as the wind direction. So once you cross over the equator, you get into a belt of wind called the Southeast Trades. And I wanted to go due south to head towards the Southern Ocean, but unfortunately, that's hard on the wind. You're going into the waves, bashing, and day after day after day after day, I was doing the exact same thing. The boat was tilted over about 15 or 20 degrees, and I'm lurching up and down over these waves, and living your life in those conditions for weeks on end becomes almost unbearable. I mean, you're pretty much... You're jostled, you're jolted, you're bumping into things, you're having to grip and hold on to everything you can, whatever you do. And you have to cook, you have to sleep, you have to eat, you have to manage the sails, do all this stuff day and night. And your whole world is just in constant motion. So it was draining on me quite a bit. But the South Atlantic... the Southeast Trades go for, maybe about 2,000 miles. And once you get through that, you get to an area called the Variables. Now, just before that, I was able to see one of my favorite sights out on the ocean. And that's when an island comes into view, or as they say, an island rises from the sea. Because as you head towards it, and this was an island called Trinidade, which is a few hundred miles off the coast of Brazil, way down in the South Atlantic. And it's sort of a storied place. Supposedly, Captain Kidd buried his treasure on there. Bernard Moitessier had sighted it and gotten in really close when he was doing his trip around the world. I just wanted to see it because I hadn't seen land in close to 50 or 60 days. And I got within about 5 miles of it. It was really quite a sight, really rugged. Supposedly there's a little Brazilian military base or something like that on the opposite side, but I just sort of cruised on by and got to experience that beautiful feeling of seeing an island rise out of the sea. It is pretty incredible, and it took 4 or 5 hours to actually pass by it because I was so far away, and I think that whole time I never stopped looking at it. So it was a change of pace because I'm still getting used to being out all by myself for now month after month, and it sort of drains on you. I know I was getting pretty lonely out there, but I was also making good time. The winds were holding steady, the trades are great, and we were blasting our way down. Did have one issue. It hadn't rained since the doldrums, and after weeks of being out there, I'm slowly eating away at my water supply. But I'm kind of hopeful at that point that once I get further south into the Southern Ocean, it'll probably rain a bit more. I know in Robin Knox Johnson's book, he talks about sort of hoping for that same thing because he definitely had some water issues as I read. So I'm heading further and further down, and I remember some of the stress levels began to really pop up when I got a few of the forecasts, and I was basically looking at an area further south on the edge of the Southern Ocean. And to say it was a little bit terrifying is to say the least, because I was watching the top half of some of these low pressure systems, a Southern Ocean low, passing underneath me. And I was also starting to feel the effects of some of these swell that were rolling up from down there. And though they were from storms thousands of miles away, they carried a weight with them that definitely piqued my interest a little bit. And I thought, wow, if these are this big and here, what's it going to be like when I actually am down there kind of dealing with those storms? But I was still pretty far to the west, and, because those southeast trades were sort of pushing me away. But as soon as I got to the variables, then the winds get fickle. They come from different directions, and I started to make my way over to the east and heading towards the Cape of Good Hope. And the first of the low pressure systems, I just caught the northern edge of. It wasn't too bad, but it brought some rain. The temperatures dropped, and it was sort of my first taste of a pretty stiff breeze out there. Nothing too crazy, but it was nice because I was able to experiment with the boat a little bit, see how she handled and all that stuff. And now I had the long venture to the east to get over towards the Cape of Good Hope. And one of the things, when I made that cut across, there's an area in the South Atlantic called the South Atlantic High. And it's this basically high pressure area that sort of floats and meanders right in the middle. And there's no wind. It's like a doldrums of the South. And I cut kind of just south of it and actually wandered into what's known as the South Atlantic Garbage Patch. And it's not quite as big as the one out in the Pacific, but for 5 days, I don't think there was ever a time where I couldn't go on deck and actually look around and count multiple pieces of floating plastic or fishing gear or buoys or bottles, things like that. So it was a little distressing to see that, and I remember feeling pretty bad. And it definitely has changed my life ever since I got back to land, trying not to use that sort of stuff. But that being said, I got through there, and now my eyes are dead set on getting down to the roaring 40s and getting underneath the Cape of Good Hope. And I've passed a few different ships here and there, and they gave me good weather updates. But as I drew close, about 10 days or so, I went through the first little bit of heavy weather. Again, nothing too crazy, but it lasted for days. And the seas can build up pretty quickly, but if you give them that much time, they really start to show their strength. And I was starting to really get a glimpse of this world that I was going into. And it really is sort of a jumping off point, because once you get down past into the Southern Ocean, it's kind of like a point of no return, because everything's coming now from the west to the east, and you get a little too far in there, things get really hairy, and all of a sudden you can't claw your way back. You're sort of stuck in there. And it was a feeling that definitely gave me pause, and I wondered if this was the right life choice for me. And again, I'm just out there for 24 hours a day and just wondering and thinking and trying not to let my mind get the best of me. And I figured, you know what? If anything, I'm going to just give it my best. I'll jump into it and we'll start sailing. And if all hell breaks loose and I'm overwhelmed and I'm way out of my element, then, I'll head for Cape Town and then I'll go for that. But so I sort of pushed myself and motivated myself to at least give it a shot. And that definitely helped. And it was a pretty scary Cape for me. I know Bernard Moitessier talks about how he feared the Cape of Good Hope because you're so exposed for so long, and then you're just going straight into the Indian Ocean, which has a really violent reputation. So as I got down there, the forecast came in that there was going to be a pretty severe low, almost hurricane strength, coming up from Antarctica. So that definitely scared me, but I was in it at that point, and I had to make a plan and deal with it. And the way that I sort of alleviated the stress of that was to essentially come up with as many plans, so plan A, B, and C, on how to deal with it as the weather increased and got worse and worse. And essentially my game plan was to try going off of just the staysail, and then possibly, if I have to, go down to just a storm jib. I figured if I'm going to be running or broad reaching with these storms, having just the sail up forward was going to be sort of my best option. And I would later find out that I had other options as well, but I first tried it in this one, and it worked out pretty well. It was just about the right sail size, but unfortunately, the jib would keep, or the staysail would keep collapsing, and the boat had to be so far off the wind to keep that wind in the sails that the waves were sort of threatening to roll the boat over, and that definitely was not ideal. And by the time the second big system came in, I went to plan B, and I just used the mainsail. And I just wanted to see how it would work, and if it would actually be able to track without rounding up and all that sort of stuff. And eventually I found that Sparrow was able to surf those waves in the heavy breeze really well. But again, I kept it, instead of going straight downwind, I kept it off to an angle. So there was always a bit of a threat of getting sort of broached by one of these waves and knocked down. But luckily, after just a few 10 days or so, I was able to pass the Cape of Good Hope latitude or longitude and then make it past into the Indian Ocean pretty much unscathed, a little bit shaken by some of those storms, but for lack of a better word, I was feeling confident, if that makes any sense, going into the Indian Ocean, which again is another huge challenge on there. But I do remember probably one of the high points in that was working with some of the swells that came out of that bigger low pressure system, and at certain points it felt like you could put a stadium, like a sports stadium, in between these waves. I mean, they're not breaking, so they're not dangerous. They're just big rolling hillsides that keep coming one after another. But there's 1,000 or 2,000 feet in between the crest and the other crest, and it's this. The feeling shrinks me down to, I felt like I was an ant. Almost like if you're wandering around in the redwood forest. Everything is just so outside of normal scale that it's hard to really imagine. And you really do. You feel like this teeny little boat out there on this big, bad, crazy ocean. Fortunately, the winds, the heavy winds had passed by me, and so I was just receiving mostly the big swell after that. But it was an incredible sight. I mean, those massive waves, to see them up close and in person, not on video, is absolutely incredible. And it was, I don't know, in some ways it was scary, but in other ways it also boosted my confidence, or my ego, I guess, of just being down there. It was probably one of the first points of the adventure where I sort of felt like, all right, into the seas I go, and I'm an adventure man, and I'm down here, and I'm doing it, and look at me, sort of thing. I don't know. I mean, I'm alone, so I was already starting to go a little stir crazy, but off into the Indian Ocean I go, and that's pretty much where I like to say the adventure really begins. But we'll get into that on the next part of the video, and thanks for watching, and there's more to come.